Hi, everyone. My name is Cyo Ray Nystrom. I am the CEO and co-founder of Quim. Quim is a self-care line for humans with vaginas and humans without vaginas who love vaginas. We make cannabis-infused vaginal topicals for the broad spectrum of intimate health needs. We have products in both the California cannabis industry as well as the hemp-derived CBD industry that are distributed nationwide. And today I am talking to an old friend and advisor, Emily Paxhia. Emily, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and how we know each other?
Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me to participate. My name is Emily Paxhia. I'm co-founder and managing partner of Poseidon. We have multiple vehicles that now invest into the cannabis industry, and we've been doing so since January 2014 when Colorado came online. And I've been so glad to know Cyo and the team this whole time, watching what they've done, really revolutionizing two very kind of hot categories, which is feminine health as well as cannabis. So it's been exciting. So, of course, top of mind, why vaginas? Why now?
So, I think that this, I think like any entrepreneur, the first impetus to start a company really comes from a desire to solve a problem that, the founder is personally dealing with. I got my first UTI when I was about 18, and that actually started about an 8-year cycle of UTI yeast infection. And throughout that process, first, I felt so much shame about those health issues. I was so embarrassed about them. I was afraid to talk to my friends about them. And then on top of all of that shame, I felt like I was at war with my sex organs. So I was, the second I got over a UTI, the antibiotics I had to take wipe your body of all of the good bacteria, leaving you exponentially more likely to contract a vaginal yeast infection. Monostat will take care of about 96% of those vaginal yeast infections, but the ingredients in it are also really drying, often sending you right back to, an easily accessible lube like a KY or an Astroglide that are glycerin-based. Glycerin is a metabolic byproduct of sugar and really shouldn't be used by people who are susceptible to these types of issues. The FDA does not require tampon companies to list all of the ingredients in tampons, nor do they require companies to list all of the ingredients in condoms. So sometimes you have people thinking that they're allergic to latex when really they're sensitive to glycerin. And as I started to do this research, I started to realize how prevalent some of these other health issues were that I wasn't even experiencing, be it endometriosis, PCOS, pain with penetration. And I started to look at, okay, if this is the body that I'm in, if, there's nothing I can do to change, like I got one body, this is what I was given. How do I proactively care for it? In the same way I wear sunscreen, I drink water, I exercise. These are all ways that I think societally we've come to understand that it's much more cost effective to keep your body healthy than wait until you're in a reactive situation. So I started doing research on what are my proactive options, and I found pretty much nothing. But in that sort of trial process, I did find some ingredients that were really, really helpful, and they weren't necessarily new. They were a part of plant-based medicines that have been used for thousands of years. Cannabis obviously being, probably one of our biggest hero ingredient. But then we also have ingredients like tea tree oil, which is a natural antimicrobial, antibacterial. It also has a really nice cooling sensation. We also found Damiana, which is a shrub that's native to South America that has been used as an aphrodisiac, but topically it's shown to help with vaginal elasticity. We are living in an era of women's empowerment. I think there's a major shift towards reclaiming sexuality and reclaiming health as something that is not shameful. And I think that there is this really exciting opportunity that we saw at Quim to not just address vaginal health and to not just address sexual pleasure. We saw those as incredibly binary options, whereas what we're looking to do is build a holistic line that meets all of your intimate care needs. It doesn't have to be recreational or medicinal. A healthy sex life and healthy vaginal health is good for your whole body and it's recreational. It doesn't have to be either or. So I think we saw an opportunity to capitalize on changing perceptions around, sex and wellness, and, a part of a movement to reclaim things that have been used to keep women down.
It's true. And one of the things I always loved about how you talk about this is it's for people with vaginas and people who love people who have vaginas. And it's like, why? I mean, people chase lifetimes chasing around vaginas, basically. But it's like, those of us who have it have always, like you've said, been kind of shamed by having to go through upkeep on these things. And it's like, why not engage everyone who's interested in vaginas? So I've always thought that was really smart of you to think about it that way. And it's something we should really open up a lot more about, because there's so much to it, and the health around it and the proactive nature of that is really what resonated with me. And I've learned so much actually from being a Quim customer, as it were.
Yeah. And definitely, people ask us, I think all the time, like, okay, your tagline says vaginas, people with vaginas, people without vaginas, people who love vaginas. Why not just say women and people who have sex with women? And I think the answer to that is because it's 2020, folks. Not everyone who has a vagina identifies as a woman, and not everyone who identifies as a woman has a vagina. And what we realized is that some of our earliest and most vocal brand supporters, be it Buck Angel, who's a trans activist and adult entertainer, was actually one of the first people in the 1970s to get gender affirmation surgery. We met with him at an event in San Francisco, and he was the one who actually alerted us to the fact, that's the coolest thing about knowing your customers, is when you meet them, you get to understand how your products are affecting their lives and how that's different from your own health journey. And so in talking to Buck, he educated us to the fact that if you're going through a gender transition and you're taking testosterone, that has a lot of side effects. Some of them are great, some of them are not so great. One of them is that it actually it increases vaginal dryness, and it also increases the likelihood of getting a vaginal infection. And so by keeping our language inclusive, I think it reminds people, it also reminds ourselves that we're not just making products for ourselves. Of course, that's how it started. But every time we develop a new product, we get to see how this new group of people, why it's important for them. Like when we launched Smooth Operator, which is our latex safe, aloe vera based CBD formula. We actually launched that product in partnership with a cancer survivor organization, because what we didn't realize is if you are going through chemo or a lot of different cancer treatments, it will essentially set your body into early menopause. And so, you can have a lot of pain with penetration, low libido, dryness, and a lot of these women that we're working with are getting diagnosed with cancer very young, which is terrifying for so many reasons. But the likelihood of surviving is a lot higher. And so how do we update the narrative from just surviving cancer to thriving while living with cancer, while going through this? And I think that that's one of the most exciting things we are doing, is that every time we, launch a new product or do a new event, we learn more about what people need.
Mm-hmm. COVID-19. So thinking about that, how has it affected your business, both on being like a startup side, but also in this, sexual health, sexual kind of revolution, female and vagina empowerment side?
Yeah, just from, I think everyone's business shifted. There was a 2-week span from mid-March to late March where suddenly no one was playing the same game anymore, and that looked, at first it was like, okay, we're shifting to remote work. Okay, we're shifting, we're going to be doing a lot more content. We're going to be talking to people because people are alone. People are so much more isolated. From a business standpoint, we saw within the span of, let's say, 2.5 weeks, at least 40 or 50% of our retailers had to close, temporarily. But, we sell our CBD products through, high-end boutiques, through waxing salons, through OBGYNs, and also through Urban Outfitters, Anthropologie, Good Vibrations. All of those stores had to close temporarily. many of them were able to pivot to an e-commerce strategy. But if you're a small brick and mortar boutique, that's going to take a while. And so we saw that, I would say up until this year, the majority of our revenue was coming from wholesale relationships. So selling our products to people who would then sell them to their customers. That was true on the CBD side of the business and the THC side. Thankfully, dispensaries were named essential businesses, but what we were seeing is that people were stocking up on flower or vape cartridges for the apocalypse. They were not exactly going into stores with a whole lot of budget earmarked for new products. Also, we couldn't have people in stores doing demos, educating. And so we saw a major shift. Suddenly, wholesale sales were down, but as that happened, we started seeing faster direct-to-consumer growth than we had ever seen. And suddenly, instead of getting, 10 orders a day, we were getting 20, 25. And which has showed us that there was an opportunity to really own the consumer experience, from our social media to our email marketing channels to the actual full fulfillment process. It's all through Quim. And that just gives us so much insight and analytics into who is actually buying our products and how are they reacting to the way that we're talking to them? What are they telling us that we need? And, I think for us, of course, it was a struggle to see the closing of these shops that used to sell our products. But at the end of the day, the most profitable side of our business is selling direct to consumer. And it also gives us the ability to really own that whole consumer experience, which is really powerful because what we're talking about is sensitive and has not always been done in a way that I think supports a shame-free dialogue. So it really gave us, we had this moment, this sort of aha moment, where we were like, okay, we need to pivot to being really a direct-to-consumer brand. Of course, we will keep the wholesale side of the business running, and we have started to see the recovery of the wholesale side of the business. It's slow, but it is recovering. But in the meantime, why invest more resources in a less profitable part of the business when we could really own the whole journey? And it's the most profitable, it's the fastest growing. And it also gives us an opportunity to not just develop products, but develop content and build community around that, which I think is such, it's why people buy these products. I mean, the products are good, but I think the community and the messaging behind it, we hear that so often that it really moves people and it makes people feel excited and okay about the fact that vaginal health can be a precursor to the pursuit of pleasure. Sometimes, no matter how sexy, it's hard to feel super sexy and engaged if you have a low-level UTI or recurrent BV. And I think particularly as, we saw the entire nation sort of hunkering down at home, people were very interested in increasing their intimacy, be it with themselves or with their partners. Some people's libidos were through the charts. Some people's were really not doing well. But I think our products gave people hope that they could find intimacy, find joy at home during a pandemic.
One of the things that I wanted to circle back on is you were talking about the ingredients in your products, and you're not just pushing cannabis as like the only active thing. And I think that's so interesting and important as somebody who, wants to keep it going great down there. I want to understand things like elasticity and just general health and keeping some of these things that do plague the vagina away, like UTIs or yeast infections, all of those fun things. But can you speak more about some of those active ingredients? And I'm also curious if this has been like a tip of the iceberg thing for you, if you're now discovering even more amazing medicinal plants that can play in the space of the vagina.
Totally. I mean, so other than, cannabis is how we really got started in this. But actually cannabis was not the first vaginal health product that I made for myself. That was way later. The first products I made for myself were these little tea tree suppositories. And I think that, and then I started working in the cannabis industry and got exposed to how cannabis, what it can do when absorbed vaginally. But I think for us, we've always been a plant-based intimate wellness company. And the more we can work with women like Jessa Blades, who's a naturalist, work with our formulation scientists. The really cool thing about a lot of these herbs, including cannabis, is that they have adaptogenic properties. So when you combine them, they are, it's the sum, I always mess this up. The sum of the parts is great. The sum of the parts is greater than each individual. I struggle with that. But what we're finding is that there are so many ingredients that we use for other sensitive areas of skin. And of course, you have to be really careful if you're talking about actual internal use. Making suppositories is a very different process than making an anti-itch cream for your vulva. But there are, even just looking at, if you were to look at a Vagisil or an anti-itch cream, looking at what is the base of the cream? Is it a glycerin? Is it a vegetable oil? Well, now we know that actually aloe vera should, for us, in our own experience, aloe vera is an amazing base. It can be infused with a lot of different things. It dries non-tacky. It's naturally anti-candidal. It's pH balancing. There are so many ingredients that I think, I actually even sometimes look at like baby care, like diaper rash things that are used for very sensitive parts of our body or for hypersensitive parts of our population that we can apply to a vaginal use case. And I think that, where the future of Quim includes so many more products, some of which might not even have cannabis or CBD in them. Because at the end of the day, we're not a weed company. We're an intimate wellness brand that's on a mission to normalize these issues, to take shame out of it, and to create products that help foster sustainable practices of self-care. And that, when we say sustainable practices of self-care, that means what are practices that you can maintain that are not, it's not like you don't have to steam your vagina 3 times a day. Would love a vaginal steam every now and then, but it needs to be sustainable. And also looking at what is sustainable for our planet. Not using palm kernel oil, not using a ton of plastic packaging, using recycled packaging, sourcing ingredients as locally as possible. And I think that I think that actually gets into why we're doing what we're doing, why we're crowdfunding. We need to be looking at capitalism in a more sustainable way. If we're going to be putting new products, which means new packaging, into the world, we need to make sure it's in a way that isn't going to seriously detract to our own health or our planet's health.
So let's talk about what's coming next in that same vein. What's next for Quim? What's next for the ecosystem you live in, and what can we expect?
Yeah. So, one of the reasons we are doing this crowdfunding campaign is twofold. The first of which is realizing, earlier on this year that we needed to pivot to becoming a strong, to being a direct to consumer business first. That is the most profitable part of our business. It's the fastest growing. And so to do that, we're a team of 3 people right now. To do that requires marketing spend. It requires digital advertising. It requires content creation in a very scheduled daily way where you are engaging with your customers. You're producing, be it blog posts, be it webinars. You need to be engaging with your customers all the time. And so doing this crowdfunding campaign will allow us to bring in someone who specializes in digital marketing. It's a very different skill set than what I have right now or what any of the members of my team do. And I think, a beautiful and exciting thing about this past year is that everyone on the team has had to learn at least one part of the digital marketing stack. We have one person who's now the master of Google Ads. We have one person who's doing, 3 times a week, quippy email newsletters. We are doing retargeting ads. But all of this, we have to test it because we have a limited budget. So we test it and we're like, okay, we'll give it 2 months. We'll try something with this influencer. Over the past few months, we've figured out what does work. And now we just need to be able to put some money behind it. Because if we know that if we put, $400 a month behind Google Ads and it generates over $600 in sales, amazing. We should be putting $5,000 a month behind it, $10,000 a month, until you hit that point where, you have to spend too much on the search terms. So I think for us, being able to hire and support and invest in direct-to-consumer growth will allow us and give us give us more brand awareness that will also fuel us to be able to drive new products. There are so many new products that I'm really excited about. And some of them have CBD and some of them don't. They're all about sustainable, plant-based, intimate care options. So I think for us, being able to expand our catalog on our own website, we're also in talks with some, major retailers. We're in talks with Whole Foods right now. We're also looking to expand the THC side of the business via potential licensing deals to get it to other states, because we know that those products, they interact differently, they have different use cases, and different people will be interested in them. But we also know that the THC side of our business, even if it's right now, it's pretty siloed in California, it drives traffic to our website. And let's say you fall in love with a product in that's at a THC dispensary. Well, and then let's say you're backpacking, or you are only in LA for a week and you go back to New York where you can't get these. It supports the growth of the CBD side of the business.
Very cool. I think that's spot on. And I was curious too, as you're developing more of your kind of digital strategy and content and marketing strategy, what is your thought around experts that you're able to engage, who people can look to? Because one of the things that strikes me is I'll tell my friends about this, and I still feel like I'm a little bit ahead on some of these things. Actually, on both, I think, on intimacy and on cannabis and actually plant medicine. But so some of my friends are kind of like, well, what do doctors have to say about it? Or what are things I have to be careful with it? And then I just usually direct them to the site. But I was curious about how you feel about lining up experts to allay concerns for those who we're bringing along on this.
Yeah, I think it's so important. It's also been something that in the midst of COVID, we've really been able to start building out this doctor's program. So we probably have right now, we have a list of 100 doctors we'd like to work with. We're in contact with, let's say, about 10 of them. We have programs with 4 of them. So what we do with those doctors, first we get on a call with them, they try the products, they evaluate the COAs, all the ingredients, and then we send samples and marketing information to their office. And that way, particularly OBGYNs, obviously, we're actually starting to work with some oncologists, doctors that specialize in pelvic floor health, PCOS, endometriosis. I feel like endometriosis is a medical condition that is only just now starting to get the recognition it deserves. For most people, it goes undiagnosed for a decade before they can even, they get a doctor who can look them in the eye and say, you're not crazy. This is a real condition. And I think even just being in, whether it's the community we've built on our Instagram or doing podcasts, it's every time I work on I do a podcast with someone, I get emails from doctors being like, hey, I listened to this podcast, would love to learn more. And I think for us, it's so important. Of course, before we launch any product, it's reviewed by a PhD pharmacist. It's reviewed by doctors. We take all of those steps. Everything is tested by a third party. But I think the real thing is making sure that doctors know about these products and that they're able to share them with their patients. Because I know, given my own health experiences, I would have much preferred to have my doctor say, hey, you can try this, instead of spending 30 hours in some kind of creepy corners of the internet where there's yin yangs in the background and Bobby McFerrin music. And I'm like, I love this, but it doesn't necessarily make me feel like there's a ton of credibility behind this. So that's actually been a campaign or a project we've been able to really work on during COVID, because we don't pay those doctors. These doctors are looking for solutions. And so we don't have to pay the doctors. And instead, what we do is we give a promo code that the doctors can say, hey, try this, here's 20% off your first purchase, because it is scary to take that first step. And our products are not cheap, because we make them with really high quality ingredients in ethically, we create them using ethical work practices. And I don't necessarily think everyone needs these products. I think they're not everyone needs to spend $48 on a lube, but for the people who have been searching and sort of gritting their teeth while they have sex because it's painful, or dealing with, major inflammation post-sex, there is a large enough group of people who do not have enough options available to them. And that's really our sweet spot. I'm not in the business of trying to convert everyone to buying $48 lube, but if you're one of those people for whom nothing else has worked, this is something worth trying. And I think that that's been really helpful for me, at least personally, when we're fundraising or pitching or trying, doing an event at some of these stores, is making sure people know, like, we're not trying, these products might not be perfect for everyone. And I'm not trying to sell them to people who are not looking for a solution to something they're going through. And I think the solution could be like, I want to have better sex, or I'm dealing with vaginal dryness, or like I have a hard time orgasming from penetrative sex, or I have a difficulty climaxing, period, full stop. That's okay. This is something you can try. And so I think for us, on the THC side, making it easier to try by launching smaller unit sizes so people can try it for less than $20, because it's, it would be hard to convince me to try something for like $48. So we really want to make sure that we can lower the barrier of entry, knowing that for people who really need these products, they'll go and buy the full size one.
Yeah, I think you just hit it on the head, because I was going to say, there's when you need it because you're doing prevention and you've got specific target issues that you're looking to work around. And then there's also just like, what if this is fun? What if this is fun and there's no downside to it? Why can't we have that? And maybe I can have better sex than I even thought I was having. That's
something I actually really love about these products, is that they take a little bit to kick in. You apply them, and then depending on if you're using a nano emulsion formula or just a straight oil-based formula, but oil-based formulas will take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes to kick in, meaning you'll start to feel some increased warmness, increased sensitivity. What I love about that is it means that first, I go into the bathroom or wherever and I apply these products to myself, which tells my brain that I'm actually setting an intention to make space for some type of sensual activity. Sometimes nothing happens. That's okay. But it really puts the agency, it puts me back in charge instead of being like, oh, is my partner gonna seduce me? Well, that puts a lot of pressure on someone else. Maybe, I think it's really important to be like, first, I just want to make myself open to this. I'm going to apply this to myself. Remember that I am worthy of sensual touch. I deserve it. There's time for it, even if it's fast. And I think that that has such a huge mental impact, at least on me, that then makes it way easier to just get into it or not.
It's so true. I mean, it's the same thing people talk about, if you have trouble getting motivated to work out, step one, put on your workout clothes.
I mean, I think we're all coming to understand rituals it's what keeps us sane. Whether it's your morning coffee ritual or your evening wind down, skincare, reading a book, we need rituals. And sometimes, I've been concerned that particularly I think a lot of people with vaginas, a lot of women are taking on a lot more responsibilities at home while also maintaining their jobs. I think it's really important that that there's space for these rituals. And the fact that we saw such pretty explosive growth on the direct to consumer side, it shows me that, they're willing to invest. There is demand for intimate care products. So whether or not it's happening, that people are willing to spend money to try.
I agree. So just thinking back, I loved your story about how you started this and with the tea tree oil capsules. And I'm a big fan of tea tree oil. I put it on everything. It's like my Windex. What I was going to say is, so you started there, and that's very hands-on, just bespoke, basic manufacturing. How have you ramped this, and how do you anticipate that you will ramp to meet demand? Because I do think that as this evolves, I think there will be more and more interest in these products. So how do you see that changing?
Yeah, I mean, it's always so makes my heart pitter patter when I think back to the first formulas I was making. It was like 2017. I was in my kitchen. We didn't have a mutual benefit corporation. I was just making, whatever weed I had at home. I would cook it up, mix it up, put a few things in there, and then give it to some girlfriends. And it really wasn't until I left a jar at a friend's house in LA, and I was like, oh, sorry about that. And she was like, actually, I used it. I'm going to need some more. That I realized that there was an opportunity to actually, take some of these health issues that I've been going through and that I knew other people had been going through and start making products for it. But that was in, 2017. It was before the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act. Prop 64 went into place in 2018. So even from, in 2017, when we were making our products in a small shared commercial kitchen, my business partner, Rachel Washington, and I were literally making every product, putting every label, every box had 7 different stickers. And we would just sit there and we just da-da-da-da-da. And then 2018 happened. It was very clear that we could not keep producing in a shared manufacturing space with caterers and, other small businesses. And we went through the process of finding someone to manufacture these products on our behalf. We went through, we talked to everyone who was doing sort of white label manufacturing. It was really hard to find someone who could replicate our formulas. We didn't think they were that complicated, but it turns out when you're doing things at scale, it's hard, you have to go through a few different testing rounds. And then when we went into CBD manufacturing, our first CBD manufacturer was someone who was local. They were based in San Francisco. They were amazing. They had the phenomenal lab. They had never made other people's products before, and they had definitely never done fulfillment before. So we start working with them. We work with them for probably about 6 months. It's amazing to get things off the ground, but we start to see that we're starting to get enough volume coming in that the pricing is not making sense. We needed to start hitting some economies of scale. We needed to have, the pricing needed to be different for shipping out 100 units than it would be for 1,000 units. And so we, went back to the drawing board, talked to everyone again, and found, and when we found our new manufacturer, we were able to decrease manufacturing costs by 35%. And we were able to start purchasing, our base materials in 50-gallon drums instead of 1-gallon sort of pots. And I think for us, the next step is really going to be around contingency plans. I think 2020 has been all about the contingency plan. We now have one manufacturer in CBD, one in THC. God forbid something happens to those, we need backups. And so right now we're in a process of setting up backup plans for both those sides of the business. I was talking to my uncle, who is the vice president of global kitchen operations at the Cheesecake Factory. So very different business, but I called him and he was talking to me about how, a couple years ago, all of the French fry production, their normal supply of French fries went down by 75% because everyone, be it McDonald's, Carl's Jr., the Cheesecake Factory, probably your local fancy restaurant, gets their French fries from the same 3 potato farms in Washington. A couple of years ago, there was a major boll weevil infestation, and they lost about 70% of their crop. And so now was talking to me, he's like, well, now I have a guy in New Jersey, I have a guy in Tennessee, and he was just like, listen, the unit economics will always be best with our primary manufacturer. But if there's a hurricane, if there's a wildfire, the customers at Cheesecake are used to a certain kind of French fry. So how do I ensure that there isn't a break in the supply chain? And I think that that's now the step we're at. It's not, I think we've found a way to really reach economies of scale. Of course, when we start shipping, 20,000 units a month, we'll need to reevaluate and make sure those are still, the cost of production is getting cheaper. But I think the step we're at right now is making sure we have redundancy and contingency plans for all sides of the supply chain.
So this has been so fun. I think we should take it to the final question here, which is, you mentioned a little bit earlier about crowdfunding and some of the dual benefits of taking this approach to fundraising. You have been an intrepid founder in terms of how you've gone after raising capital. I mean, I know from my own experience raising money that many of the people sitting across the table from you in meetings don't have vaginas or have interest in having a vagina, but they probably have one in their lives. I'm not sure what those conversations are like, unfortunately, but I think that raising money as a female founder, I can speak from my own experience on that, and then raising money as a female founder in a category that is really progressive and future-facing and forward-looking, I have to imagine that's introduced some challenges, or maybe it's been beneficial. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, and then also curious about crowdfunding as a vision for where you're going next.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's two-part. First off, like you hit the nail on the head. The way we had been raising capital meant that you had to be an accredited investor. So you pretty much need to have a net worth of $1 million or more. Based on the way wealth is distributed and has been distributed in this country since its origin, it meant mostly we were talking to older white men, some of whom were amazing. They got it right away. And a lot of whom said, this sounds like a niche within a niche within a niche, because they weren't hearing about these issues. And I think there is inherent bias that, investors, particularly on the VC side, and they have to go to bat for these companies, they want to feel a personal connection with the solution that's being provided. And we were seeing that, we pitched at ArcView and we won. We pitched at South by Southwest and we won. We pitched at, Pitch Global, we won. We are winning all of these pitch competitions, and people were so excited about the products, but the checks weren't exactly like flying in. I mean, we raised, close to $1 million via sort of traditional fundraising, just getting out there on the circuit, having these calls. But I started to realize, mid this year that I would take sometimes six calls with a potential investor. We'd do all these financial reviews. We're doing due diligence, which I have nothing against due diligence, but I realized that if we were going to pivot to a direct-to-consumer team, I could not be spending all of my time trying to chase down investors in the midst of a global pandemic and economic downturn where suddenly money got a lot harder to find. And I think amidst all of that, we started to realize that in America right now, rich people are getting richer. Poor people are getting poorer. Jeff Bezos makes like another $1 billion every day. And the gap between, it's like we're almost losing the middle class. And we looked at, I looked at sort of what I've been seeing happen with, female founded, particularly young female founders who go and raise $100 million from all of your classic Silicon Valley VCs. And they invest, I think when you're pitching VCs, they're looking for 10x growth or more. And they're looking for such fast growth because they need to recoup their investment, that I think it can actually have a lot of cultural effects or negative effects on the company. Suddenly you start hiring too fast. So you have breaks in company culture. Suddenly you need to scale up production. And so maybe you cut some corners on product quality. And I think it can lead to a situation where your brand integrity suffers. And then in some cases, the founders are replaced. And for us being so, we're here for a long time. Our goal is not to flip this thing in a year. It's to really build a global brand. And when we thought about who are we accountable to, we were like, okay, look at our cap table. We're accountable to these people. We've promised our projections, so we have to do this. And we started to look at, when we eventually go public or get bought by a much bigger company, who has the opportunity to get a piece of this upside. I looked at our cap table and I was like, okay, so all these people were going to be everyone on our cap table already has access to intergenerational wealth. And I think that particularly for someone we're making products for people with vaginas, and a lot of them are younger people who don't have that access to capital. And even just looking at the way investment opportunities have been, who has access to them? I think we saw an opportunity to democratize who could win. We are so bullish on this. We know that this is going to make our investors a lot of money. It will hopefully make me a lot of money too. And I as we're looking at the past year, I think there's an opportunity to have way more people share in the upside. And I kind of think, beyond just Quim, I really am excited about crowdfunding, particularly the way Republic does it, which is different than Kickstarter. You're not donating and we send you a sticker. You become an investor. You own a piece of this company. And that is a really, really big differentiator. It allows people to invest $100, $150, $2,000. Our minimums were $25,000 before, and it just means we were talking to a very different audience. And I'm really excited about A, sharing in the opportunity, and B, ensuring that our accountability is to our customers. It's the people who love the products, who use them. And I think that will ensure that as we grow sustainably. We don't pivot to a place where suddenly we're spending $1 million a month on ads, because that's not sustainable. It will mean that the growth is real growth, and that will continue over time in a way that might not be explosive, but it will be healthy. And I think that right now we kind of need that.
I think it's really, again, it feels like it ties very intimately to what you're doing as a company in the way that you're thinking about democratizing access to private investing. And I think that, Robinhood tried to do this, or is trying to do it on the public side. I think there's some things around that are presenting some challenges in this time where there's market distortion. That's a sidebar. But I think what's cool about this platform is just like what you're saying, it's giving an access point for investors who didn't always have it, and a way to participate in something. Like Ben and Jerry's very famously turned to Vermont as their community to invest into their company, to build. And it was because it was something they were invested in their backyard. And I think as consumers, we like to maybe be able to participate in a company that really means something to us. And I think your company will probably mean a lot to a lot of people. And so I think it's a really smart way to approach it. And it's another way to just develop awareness of what you're doing. It's another platform to reach people. So I think empowering people in all ways, be it sexual, financial, information, all of these things that you're doing are very, very, very well linked together. So it's a really compelling story. And I think that the Republic platform, you're right, stands out because there's something about being an investor and being involved in it. And it really does make a difference in terms of how much you really think about the company and want to support it. So I think that's really wise.
Thanks, Emily. Will you be investing on our Republic campaign?
I will.
Amazing. I just had to throw that one at you.
Sure. No, it's funny. You were just talking about that. I was thinking about that the other day, and I was like, oh, this is an exciting way to participate and to kick that off. So
awesome. Well, Emily, thank you so much for joining me today. You have been such a valuable resource to us. It's so amazing to talk to women who are doing what you're doing. I think, I've just always really appreciated your no bullshit attitude. I think you tell it like it is. And that's been super helpful, when I was 26 and starting to do this and had no idea what I was doing. But I'm just really grateful to have you on our team.
And likewise, I thank you for being a leader in this area, because it actually has really improved my life being a customer of Quim. So